All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the NAFB Industry Insights webinar. And this afternoon, we're going to hear from three prominent and experienced farm broadcasters. We have Meghan Grebner from Brownfield Ag News. We have Dustin Hoffmann from the Iowa Agribusiness Network. And then we have Jeff Nalley from the Cromwell Ag Network and AgriPulse. And this afternoon, it's really open-ended as far as the topic. But we want to learn about what they're hearing, everything from ag policy in Washington to news, from what's making news in their coverage areas and what they're reporting on now. And then, really also open it up to other questions that you may have, including, how we as allied industry can best work with them. So I'm moderating the conversation this afternoon, but please, this is for everybody to get your questions answered too. My name is Gardner Hatch. I'm a strategic business lead at Woodruff, and I will moderate over the next hour. And I'm currently serving my second of 2 years as an allied industry representative on the NAFB board. I'm doing so along with Shannon Yoakley, who's also, I believe, in this meeting as well. And together, Shannon and I represent you, the allied industry members of NAFB. And we'd love to hear from you about any ideas, things like webinars or anything else that we can do to make your NAFB membership more valuable. So just feel free to reach out to us. Before introducing the broadcaster panel, I would like to acknowledge two NAFB staff members who are in this meeting and acknowledge and thank them. First, Tom Brand, who's Executive Director, and also Aaron Nash, the Marketing and Communications Manager, who are both instrumental in making this webinar happen this afternoon. So thanks to you both.
No problem, Gardner. Thanks.
Yep. So this, again, like this event is for you. I'm moderating, but it's meant to be interactive and in a format that hopefully provides you with some updates and news that you can use right away in your current jobs. Questions are encouraged. I'll try to pause at certain intervals after each of the panelists kind of makes their opening remarks. If you have questions, then I'll also leave time at the end as well for a Q&A that you can also add questions. And we are recording this session too, so that if you want to go back and listen again, or if you want to forward the link to a colleague, feel free to do that as well. And then one additional housekeeping item, if you could hit mute on your computer, unless you're asking a question, that will also help too. So before we kick things off with the panelists, I did ask Tom just to spend a couple minutes provide an update on NAFB initiatives that may be of interest to members. So Tom, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks very much, Gardner, and thanks to both you as well as Shannon for putting this first webinar together. I think this is an exciting opportunity for Allied Industry Council members, and really appreciate the vision that you have for this and the opportunity to connect farm broadcasters to AIC members. And we hope this is the first of many more to come in the future. So thank you both for your efforts there as well. Just a few weeks ago, NAFB wrapped up its annual Wash and Watch event in our nation's capital. And we had a little over 30 broadcasters that were there covering this year's meeting. We were very fortunate. We had a strong lineup at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. While the Secretary of Agriculture wasn't able to join us, we were able to hear from the Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg, as well as several undersecretaries or deputy administrators or deputy undersecretaries that were with us there at USDA. We had some policy insights that came from folks that work the Hill on Tuesday afternoon. And then on Wednesday morning, we made a trip to Capitol Hill where we heard from 14 different members of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees, as well as other lawmakers that were in attendance. The highlight of Washington Watch, in addition to those speakers that we heard from on the political front, were the Allied Industry Council members who were part of our issues forum on Monday afternoon. After the membership meeting, we had 22 different organizations and associations that were there that provided the latest and greatest in policy news and information. Thanks to them for making Wash and Watch really a great event with that kickoff of the issues forum opportunity. For those who haven't been a part of that, it's very similar to Trade Talk, but on a smaller scale. Tabletops with multiple speakers set up at each one of those associations and organizations, and broadcasters going around and doing interviews there. So a great way to gather a lot of news in really just a few hours worth of time. One of the hot topics in Washington, D.C. was the discussion that's been taking place amongst automobile manufacturers. We've already had Ford Motor Company that's come out and said they're planning on discontinuing AM radio from the dash of all vehicles in 2024. They've already made this move with their electric pickup. And as that news comes out of the lawmakers, we think are going to consider following suit. So one of the things that the NAFB Board of Directors did was they wrote a letter that went to all members of the House and Senate Agriculture Committees, telling them about the importance of AM radio, not just to a rural audience, but to all audiences under every zip code, because the emergency use of radio is so important. When it comes to a national emergency or something that's locally going on with weather or another event, we know that people tune in and turn to the radio for that as a source of information. So we're working on a campaign notifying members of Congress and educating them. A lot of them, this was an education, first time they'd heard of the issue. We'll continue to work on that and expect to see and hear more from NAFB in the coming weeks. So just a quick snapshot as to some of the things that we've been working with here in the last few weeks. It was so good to see many of you at NAMA just a couple of weeks ago in St. Louis. I won't take any more additional time. I'll turn it back over to Gardner and let our broadcasters tell you more detail about Washington Watch, as well as other topics and news that they're covering in their day-to-day broadcasts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tom. So I just to add on to the Washington Watch, I've been in agriculture for a long time, and I went to Washington Watch for the first time this year, and I highly encourage any of you to try to make it at least once. It is highly valuable just to hear about directly from the sources at USDA and Capitol Hill what's going on. But then also, I got a thrill out of watching broadcasters at work and watching how they're covering agriculture from the nation's capital. So it was a great experience. So highly recommend it. All right, let's jump into talking to the broadcasters now, and I'm going to introduce each in turn and just have them, give just a few minutes of an update on kind of what's making news from their perspective. And we'll kind of go in alphabetical order here. Meghan, if I could start with you, just a quick introduction. I know a little bit about you, Meghan. I know that you grew up in Illinois. We have that in common. And but one thing I read about you was that your passion for radio started at a very early age, and that when you were as a young Meghan, when you were sitting around the family dinner table, you're listening to farm radio, and you told your family that someday they were going to be hearing you on the radio. And it wasn't too long after that that became true when you went to WMBD, WIRL in Peoria. So I thought that was an interesting story. But you've come a long way since then. Today, you're a news anchor and a reporter at Brownfield Ag News, which is the largest ag news radio network in the country. And you've been with Brownfield since 2011. And this year, you're also serving as the NAFB president of the NAFB Foundation. Meghan, you cover and produce ag and news feature content, plus you anchor the livestock market programs for Brownfield as well. And you're a graduate of the Illinois Ag Leadership Program. And in 2009, you were recognized as an emerging young leader in ag broadcasting and journalism with the NAFB Horizon Award. So, Meghan, with that, it's kind of an unfair question to ask you in a few minutes, kind of what you're covering, because I know, when I go on the Brownfield website, it's like everything from what's going on in Brazil to what's going on regionally. But let me just ask you, and I know that you have a focus on livestock, so maybe we start there as far as, what you're reporting on right now.
I would say whether it's livestock or crops, row crops, specialty crops, weather is probably the number one thing I hear from producers. I know, Brownfield is anchored in Jefferson City, Missouri. They're kind of in this weird drought belt, and it's interesting to talk to cattle producers in that part of the country opposed to where I am in Kentucky or in Tennessee or in even South Dakota, where there's been some precipitation recently that's kind of changed things around. I know I talked to the NCBA president recently, and he was talking about how he's a little bit more optimistic, looking into like getting some rains. He's had rains, they've had snow over the winter time, so it kind of changes things. I think the other thing I hear when I talk to producers, I talked to a soybean grower in Tennessee yesterday, and he said, you know, I'm optimistic, but input prices are still high. Interest rates are high, and there's concerns about what's going on in the economy. And really, I don't know. I guess I feel like if you're a farmer, you don't farm. I grew up, if I would have gone back to the farm, I would be the 7th generation on my family's farm. And you don't do that job without having this constant and at least some tiny aspect of optimism and hope that this year is better than the last year, especially knowing what we've been through cost-wise, input cost-wise. And I think that's kind of the gauge that I get from producers as I talk to them wherever they are throughout the country. But if we're talking news and issues, I would tell you weather. Drought, and farm bill are things that come up constantly, and cost are things that come up repetitively in conversations.
So weather and farm bill, that's probably reflective of the time of year too, and you know, going into the new crop year.
We are in a 2023 farm bill year too. Is it going to get done? What does that mean if it doesn't get done? And is it, you know, how does this whole political environment translate into the programs that producers need in the long run?
Sure. Is supply one thing that manufacturers have dealt with over the past couple of years? Is supply, is that an issue that you're hearing from listeners as well?
So that's a question I ask consistently, regardless of where the producer is from. I have heard less issues about supply in terms of inputs, more issues as it relates to still being able to obtain parts. I talked to a guy in Arkansas recently who said they had to make a trip to Illinois to get parts for their tractor, and he was like, and they're the only place in the country where I could get it, so I bought them all because I didn't, like, I can't afford to go down for that many days. I think that's kind of been more the issue this year, at least from the growers I've talked to, opposed to being able to get you know, chem and fertilizer and those types of inputs.
Okay. So I'll remind everybody, if anybody else has any questions for Megan, and also along the way, if you just have a question and want to throw it in the chat too, in the bottom of your screen, you can do that as well as we go along. Megan, we'll come back to you. Let's move on. Next alphabetical order is Dustin. And Dustin, I got to know you a little bit at Washington Watch, and I've also heard too that you have a unique passion for history. And that really became apparent to me when we did that tour, that monument tour in Washington, and you know, discussions along the way there, and particularly you love Civil War history. So I guess I remind and all members here that next time you see Dustin, ask him about Civil War history. And I think your favorite site to go to was Gettysburg, I read. So yeah,
that's right, Gardner.
So you, in addition to history, you also, of course, have a passion for radio and farm broadcasting, and you've been on the radio since 2007, and you've been a farm broadcaster since 2017. You're currently a supervising editor and farm broadcaster at Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, and previously you were in Redwood Falls, Minnesota, as farm director at KLGR Radio. Your work has been recognized at local, state, and national levels. For example, you were the 2016 Minnesota Farmers Union Ag Communicator of the Year and the 2017 recipient of the prestigious NAFB Doan Award, which recognizes excellence in farm broadcasting. So, Dustin, I guess I'll ask you, you cover everything from what's going on in Iowa to what's going on in Washington. from Iowa to the Farm Bill, I guess. I guess what's on your mind? What are you reporting on these days? And what's, kind of as Megan reported on, what's important to your listeners right now?
Well, obviously to start out with, I can echo Megan. Obviously, weather is the top concern as we're planting. I mean, western part of the state was in a lot of drought condition throughout much of last year, and actually much of last year, the eastern part of the state had more water than they knew what to do with. They did settle into a drought, obviously, towards the end of the year as well. And while the drought conditions have eased, it's still a top concern as we've had rain move through, but we don't get a whole lot when we get those showers. Now that's great when you're planting because you can keep going, get in the field, get things done. But once those crops need to start getting that moisture, get emerged and get a foothold, that's a lot of what their worry is. But turning to things that farmers feel like they can at least talk to somebody about is basically the federal government as a whole. Talking the Farm Bill, a lot of good points there is what's going to happen, especially when it comes to like safety net programs, things like that. But really top of mind here is talking about the waters of the U.S. rule. I mean, right now, as the last study, 97% of Iowa's acreage would be affected if that goes through. Obviously, now when we got the stay from the district court in North Dakota, that at least gave us some time while we're litigating it. And then also the concern with the E15 rule. Obviously, we just got the patch job, if you will, got that waiver for the summer. But we've already had it taken care of once, and now we've got to go through that all again. Last year the governors, Governor Kim Reynolds and a bunch of Midwest governors got together. They went to the EPA and said, "Fine, we want to redo the vapor waivers, and we want to regulate that ourselves," which would clear the way for the governors to make that decision. EPA was supposed to give them an answer within so many days. EPA's failed to do that. And so it's been a battle back and forth for quite a bit here. And a lot of the farmers, that rely on either that ethanol plant or biodiesel plant in their community that helps support that community with a lot of jobs, but also gives them a better price for their crops. And, crop prices are still good, but they're not as good as they were. And so there's a lot of concern of getting the most for each bushel. And also, it's making sure that those people still have that jobs and keeps that community vital. So that's been a big concern. And then as well, the input costs, not as much as getting the stuff, but as Megan said too, it's more of the prices of things. Obviously, with those crop prices, the corn and beans inching a little lower all the time, and even some of those hog prices. Well, hogs is another topic too, is the prices they're getting there, and if they'll get a foothold. But the thing is, those prices are sneaking up, and the prices for the bushels of grain are sneaking down. And so there's a lot of concern of how they're going to make ends meet. Also, the interest rates on their farm operating loans are different than they have been in the last couple of years as well, and higher interest rates. So that profitability margin is in more danger than it has been for a little while, for at least a couple of years. And so there's that concern as well. But like I said, overarching, I would say federal government policy and who's got rights over their lands is really been a big deal. Even as far as carbon pipelines that they're talking about as well. It's just who's got the rights to the land, and when can the landowner put their foot down and say, "This is my land, you don't get rights over it." So that's about what we're looking at right now.
Well, I mean, that's a whole list of things, that from drought to water to regulatory input cost prices, and kind of government intervention. There's a lot that growers are dealing with there. Are there, I guess on the flip side, and you mentioned like prices are still pretty good. Are there bright spots? Are there areas for optimism for growers as well that they're looking at?
Well, right now, I mean, as far as, we're always eternal optimists. We're starting that spring planting season right now. Yeah, we're a little dry, but really there hasn't been a lot of huge destructive storms. We had a few here and there, but nothing major. They're looking forward to another year. If we can actually start turning the weather around, and get out of this drought, we could be poised to have a decent year again. We're not always going to have that dry year or a year with lower crops. We're hoping to get above normal again. And, there's a heavy bar that the USDA has set for what they're hoping the yields will be. So they're optimistic we're going to get that if we can just get some timely rains, and they're thankful that they've got some good partners that can help them get that done.
Yeah. Okay. So your audience here is agri-marketers and those in communications and marketing. What, from a grower's perspective, in Iowa, for example, what learnings, I guess, should we be taking away as far as what growers are faced with, what messages, what approaches might work for those who are marketing in agriculture?
When it comes to marketing, I would say one of the things that I've really gotten to hear a lot from farmers, and I know that the idea is to talk about a product, and especially if you've got a new product, you want to talk about it, and everybody wants to say, hey, I've got product A, it does all of this stuff, and you want to talk about it. But I have learned and I've heard from farmers is they've seen an infomercial, they've seen all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about the problem, then talk about what your issue is. Whether it's, for instance, corn rootworm is always a problem. If you've got a new product that's going to handle that, come out there and talk about the problem. Bring in someone like an agronomist with your company to say, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what people are succeeding with. And a lot of you do that, but leading with that rather than doing the sales pitch first, which I understand in marketing, you want to get that out. And I respect that. That's what they're hearing is once they start hearing a product pitch, they kind of tune out as it's just another commercial, even if it is just an interview or a value add situation with the broadcasters.
Okay, good. Very good. Thanks, Dustin. And we did have a few additional people on join here. So a reminder, if you have any questions, raise your hand or send your question in chat, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. The third panelist is Jeff Nalley. Now, Jeff, you have a reputation for being one of the hardest working broadcasters in the business. I mean, the 40 deadlines per day, up to 40 deadlines, and that's pretty crazy, but it's also not surprising considering, the stations and the outreach that you're serving. You are the director of farm broadcasting with Cromwell Ag Radio Network, and then which that network broadcasts over several states, but then you're also a contributing editor for the Washington, D.C. based AgriPulse. So you're covering everything from your region to what's happening in Washington as well. You're a 40 plus year member of NAFB, I believe, and you're currently serving as vice president on the board of directors. Your daily broadcasts cover everything from breaking headline news to features to the financial markets, analysis, weather, commodity reports, farm policy, and the list goes on. You're the recipient of many awards, but I have to think that one of the most prestigious was being named NAFB Farm Broadcaster of the Year in 2010. That's got to be up there in top few of your list, Jeff. So I guess, from my perspective as far as how to kick this off, you were very involved with Washington Watch. I'm curious as far as, kind of what you got out of Washington Watch and what your impressions were of some of the takeaways for the growers that you serve in your markets.
I don't want to sound like Debbie here. I was frustrated in Washington.
Yeah. We are having trouble with the audio there.
We were working before. How about now?
Oh, there, got it now.
Okay, great. I don't want to be Debbie Downer about DC, but when you listen to all of the individuals that were talking, they really don't have a starting place yet. And it hinges off of the negotiations that are going on right now between the House Speaker and the administration. And you saw just a few minutes ago, the president say it's my way or the highway regarding the debt ceiling and regarding spending cuts. The last time the GOP was in control in the House, they took $23 billion out of farm programs. So what really makes the difference on what this farm bill is going to be is how much money do we have to spend and where can we make it effective? So many of the people who spoke gave us their best answer, but this is my frustration with being a farm broadcaster today. I think Meghan and Dustin might be able to echo this. There was a day that if you could give the sublime demand information, if you could give accurate weather information, you pretty well had your arms around this thing. But now markets are dictated by algorithmic traders. They're dictated by wars. They're dictated by financials. They are dictated by everything under the sun. And only a small percentage of that is actually the cows, plows, and sows that generations before of farm broadcasters were in. I would have farmers tell me years ago, I used to listen to you for the news, and now they tell me I listen to you for the highlights of what I'm supposed to be studying and what I'm supposed to be looking for. So that changes my dynamic of what I do every day, of instead of being able to grab a story and search it from alpha to omega, now I've got to find whatever happened in the last 30 seconds or what happened in the last hour. My work is never done, because we trade markets and we trade data. We literally are in a 24/7 business. And if you get too far away from the screen, then you get too far away of what may be relevant in news. I don't want to take anything against from Washington Watch, because what we developed there were relationships. The news that comes away from Washington Watch is valuable, but the relationships that you develop with staffers, the comments that you pull up from those leaders, help you be effective when things really get going. And most likely we won't see the fur fly until we get after August and into September, probably into the end of the year. Some of the same questions we were asking at Washington a couple of weeks ago are the same questions we're going to be asking in September, except hopefully by then we've got a baseline, which, by the way, the CBO on Friday is going to offer new budget scores for some of these proposals. So between the debt ceiling fight that's going on and the CBO score that's coming out, the WASB report that's coming on Friday, there's a lot of parameters here now that we can at least keep producers updated to the issues that they need to watch. We can also stay on the frontier of this, or on the horizon, to talk about paradigm changes with regard to the petroleum companies that are now coming in to next generation biofuels and other opportunities that may change the face of this industry as we know it. We're on the edge of that. And I think those are points that you have to keep in mind. If you would allow me, Gardner, I want to take just a minute, as I am on the executive team, the officer team. This is my second time, by the way, present back in 04, so I'm back again like a bad penny. But we sincerely, Gardner, half of the board, but especially from the officers, we want our members, all of our members, allied industry management, we want all of our members to feel an ownership of this organization. And we feel an opportunity to look and see now, how can we make it better? What are the things that you count on and depend on? And what are the things that are maybe old hat? What can we do now? Technology provides opportunity. Do we need to change meetings? Do we need to change convention? What are the things that we can do to bring real value to every person who writes a check to be a member of the association? We've got opportunity ahead. One of the things I'll highlight here, you'll hear more later on, I do have approval from the board to move ahead for what we're going to call the NAFB tip sheet. And that's where, Dustin and Meghan might say this as well. Your lead story is your big story, obviously. Your second story is probably an accent to it. But what's the 3, 4, 5 story in your newscast? Or what are the things that you're reporting on those days when maybe there's not a too clear headline? What are the frontiers that our allied industry members might have? What are those new technologies? What are those new opportunities? What are those regulations that are lurking in the background? What are the things that are happening that we can interview in ahead and be ready when those things break? On December 23 of 2003, when the cow that stole Christmas showed up, what would any of us have given for an interview with someone credible to talk about what bovine spongiform encephalopathy was? We would have been one of the few people in the world that would have had that. Had we been looking far down the road, those are things that we could prepare for. And those are the things that, as a broadcaster, I love what I do, but I'm frustrated because your work is never done. There's always another piece, there's always another angle, and you're looking to build relationships to work with whoever you can. Thanks.
I think those are some really good points, Jeff, around, the time that you spend at Washington Watch is really all about, I'm sure that by the time you got in the plane and got back home, that the situation had changed. And it was obvious to me when we were there that really the debt ceiling, and those negotiations were more top of mind to some of the legislators than the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill seemed to be kind of a little bit further down the road, but
You can't get started till you can't get started till you get started, and you can't get started for this with the budget. And I'll say this of Washington Watch, and I'll say this of the most valuable thing I walk away with. I mean, yes, interviews, but the most valuable thing I walk away with are business cards and contacts. Business cards and contacts that can build my network of people that when those stories have fresh information from someone that I know and that they know they can trust me. My most valuable thing I can ever walk away with.
Yeah. Yep. We talk about just serving on the board, when we talk about NAFB and the value of the local farm broadcaster, we talk about trust. It's the trust factor. So you're looking for sources and contacts that you can trust as well. So, it goes all directions.
My cell phone is on 24. My cell phone is on 24 hours a day.
Very good. We'll open it up for questions here. If anybody has any questions from these three panelists, if you just want to go ahead and unmute and ask your question or throw it in the chat, and we can direct it to anybody who wants to answer here. One thing, I guess, follow up from what Jeff said, and really what, for all three of you is, you talked about having the right, it's about relationships and having the right contacts and sources. And that leads to one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how can industry best work with you, as a source, so that it's not about, hey, we got the greatest new product, right? It's more about, we have a resource for you for, something that you may be working on down the road. It seems like that's really the way to go. Something that's valuable to you. Can each of you talk a little bit about kind of whether it's agency or whether it's company, what the best relationship is, in working with industry and, as a resource and as a source.
I don't know about the other two, but what I would say is, especially if you're going to talk about a situation in, let's say, Iowa, obviously for us, give us someone from Iowa that understands what the Iowa farmers are going through. I mean, you could have knowledge about a seed or a product or a chemical or whatever. And if you give us someone from Wisconsin or Ohio, sure, they know what they're talking about. But if you give us someone from Iowa, at least for our standpoint, it gives us someone that understands that the East got wet and the West did not, and understands the balance play between the two. Bringing us people who are, or at least can speak to it or have an idea of what's going on, usually helps us quite a bit, at least in telling that story.
So local sources, and they can be either grower sources or
agronomists, growers,
like
whoever you,
or,
whoever you have.
Dustin brought up a really good point in his comments, talking about products are always great. I mean, everybody, I hear farmers like, I want to know what's coming, but I want to know how it impacts me or how it benefits me. So having that news angle, if there's a product pitch, and then there's a, hey, we've got this agronomic issue that we're addressing with this product, let's help the farmers, or let's provide them with the thing that they need. And then we'll talk the product on the back end. That will always take precedent over just a straight up product interview. And being able to make that connection, like, let's solve a problem and tell you about our really great product that will help you do just that on the back end. So for me, it's always news comes first. The other thing I would say too is our business is radio. And there's times where like I'll reach out for a comment, and in certain instances, like a quote is fine, but I want audio. Our listeners turn on the radio to hear audio, and not just to hear us, primarily not to hear us, but to hear what the story or the news of the day is. And that audio tells that story so much more completely than I can with my words or with my writing. It personalizes it. It makes it relevant to the listeners in our area. And it's a big footprint. So, having that audio is so critical to what we do. Radio is our business.
So either having the opportunity to talk to somebody or getting that audio, kind of getting that audio clip, especially if it's local.
So I think for us, it's generating our own content.
Yeah.
We're a team of 12. We're in a really unique position, and it's great it's a luxury for us to have that many people who write and contribute to our news cycle every day. But in very few instances do we use prepackaged audio. There's a handful of cases that we do, but we want our own audio. We want to be able to do the interview, to ask our questions, to be able to tell the story with our voice and their voice for what Brownfield does as a network. And again, we're in a very different position than a lot of other folks who may only have one person. And that's where like the NAFB news service is so valuable to our members, and the information that's provided to there as well is so crucial to those folks who don't have a team of 12 people.
Sure.
Gardner, my suggestion, and I'm not afraid to walk up to the barbed wire on this one. There's news and there's commercials.
Yeah.
And if you can help me tell the story of the science, tell me what you're doing, put the company, put the farmer in a positive light, help me tell the story, help me create the interest in the product that you have to sell. But there's a difference between news and commercials. Back in 2004, when I was president, our theme that year was a voice for agriculture. So step to the plate and acquire, and let's talk about how agriculture is growing. Let's talk about what your research has accomplished. We'd love to talk about a new molecule, but it's just not there yet. But we can talk about efforts in sustainability. We can talk about your customers that are achieving better, achieving better results. Let's talk about the science and how a genetic trait is better than organophosphate.
Yeah.
Let's make it practical so they can digest it. And if you can do that, then you can team with me any day of the week.
Yeah. I think one, just from my standpoint, one thing that we're working on a lot these days is around the biosolutions technology, so kind of to your point, not so much the new products that are coming out, but kind of how they work, the science behind the products. And there's certainly a lot of experts out there at the company level who can speak to that, or kind of how the science is going to be, how it can apply, on the farm, more so than just the product part of it.
The one other thing I would say too is we're in the news business. Deadlines matter. And it's probably, if I'm calling, and it doesn't matter if it's a livestock organization or a grains organization or a state organization, if there's a story and I'm on a tight deadline, and I'm on a tight deadline. We have a publication deadline by 5 p.m. Eastern. And if I can't get it in there, that news story doesn't go that day. And that's critical. And I appreciate flexibility when folks give it, provide it, but I also appreciate somebody who understands the urgency of this is news. I need to talk to somebody and I really want to turn it within the next 30 minutes. And if I can do that, I can.
I'm going to echo Meghan, only I don't work for a staff of 12. I have a staff of 1. So whenever you're sitting at your desk and you're planning what you're going to do on that day off, July 4th, Memorial Day, Christmas Eve, New Year's Day, all those others, we never close. I'm on Christmas Eve. I'm on Christmas Day. We provide programming for our stations every single day. So anything that I can use that is informative, there's Washington takes days off. Other folks, the market, I can use those type of images, especially as we get closer to days like that, because we don't close.
Yeah.
We need information, and that's my opportunity to make it work. If you ask me on Thursday to do a news report the day that a WASDE report is coming out, unless you've got the goose with golden eggs, it's probably not going to land. But if you come to me on the day when I'm really looking for something strong, you can be my best friend.
Yeah.
Another thing I think I would add too is the fact that when we have that discussion over whatever it is you're communicating with us about, as soon as we get that set up and scheduled, the relationship doesn't necessarily end there. I mean, we put out the story, we take the time to write it, and then if nobody tells the company or they themselves don't share it or talk about it, then it seems like, okay, we just got the commercial out of them. Now we're moving on to the next person we can get a commercial out of. You know, that story and that relationship doesn't end with that interview. You know, it keeps continuing to grow and follow along, and making sure that your company knows that they're being talked about is a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and really a good agency person or good communications person within a company is connecting those dots. You know, that's a really good point. Good. I'll open it up to any other questions that anybody has. Go ahead and unmute if you got a question, or put it in the chat as well. I have a quiet group here.
I think one other thing too, is talking about like, sometimes a story that's has a unique maybe spin to it or a unique tie to it. We, like Jeff said, we provide programming 365 days a year, and everything has its place. And sometimes those different stories or those holidays where news doesn't happen or folks are an opportunity to tell a little bit different of a story or bring a different angle into it. I love that. Like, and I love being able to make a connection. I write our network's healthy living program, and it's been such a unique opportunity for me to get into different types of like connecting consumers with why checkoff programs matter or why exports matter to what they see in prices and those types of things. But being able to tell unique stories also is really cool. So if you have those stories, please pitch those also, because there's a time and a place for everything, and to have those, it's pretty incredible.
Okay, so let's turn this around. Gardner, if they're not going to ask us questions, I can see who's here. I see Cindy Cunningham and Kim Colombini and Barb Detterman, and I get to ask them questions all the time. So ask us questions. If you don't ask me, I'm going to turn around and ask you, Cindy.
There you go.
Wow, talk about a
broadcasters help you? How can broadcasters help?
I think I've loved this last part of the conversation. So there are 3 folks on here from our agency, and we've had a little chat going back and forth, learning as we're listening to you as well, and hearing the difference in, all 3 of you come from different size operations and types of operations, and hearing how your needs differ, I think is really important to us too. That's a learning for us as we're preparing information or preparing to work with you. Clearly it's not a one size fits all. It is, Dustin needs something that is Iowa specific and even regionalized in the state of Iowa. And Meghan doesn't want prepackaged information. She wants information that is specific to Brownfield. And Jeff, you're hungry for any kind of information that's not a product pitch. So I think that's important for all of us to hear and to remember as we're working on our projects. So thank you for that.
I like to report news from the top down because I'm covering a broad area. I've got a farmer. I can be talking to farmers in 6 states at the same time. So instead of going local, and there's nothing wrong with local, but I have the tendency that when I'm working with a company or an association, I really would like to come from the top down. So I know I've got the last word. I'm not afraid to run a local source up as long as they have the authority to speak to a broader audience.
A somewhat related question here in the chat, Jeff, and actually to all three of you, is what's the best way to break into a more localized media of radio with a more national news release or product? So you have a national release, something that's of national interest, but how do you getting into a local market, how do you make it newsworthy? How do you make it so that it's something that you want to pick up?
Find me a farmer and a person in my area. And I'll tell you, so I love the fact that I have like a single WMBD WIRL is not a small station by any means, right? But I was a single person. I had an hour-long program. I did a morning show. I did everything. And it's great. But like coming into Brownfield, I get to bring in that single network, that single station mindset into a larger network and incorporate it in a large area. If it's a national product and it's an individual, if I was still in Peoria, Illinois, find me a farmer in Woodford, Tazewell, Peoria, McLean, Sangamon County, and it's going straight to the top because it's my people and it's the people my listeners relate to. And you can look at that in like I can take that in a Brownfield angle. Find me a farmer in Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, Ohio, Indiana, like wherever our network is, I'll take that farmer and that local person or that regional person any day and 10 times on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's kind of like what I said before too, with the whole idea of get me, like I've got to cover a lot of Iowa, obviously. Get me someone from Iowa, whether it's an agronomist, whether it's a sales rep, somebody who's been coached up and can understand, if it's a sales rep, that can understand what they're talking about, how it relates to my farmers in that area, or get me an agronomist that can speak to how that's going to help, or even so much as get me a veterinarian if you're talking about animal health, or get me a veterinarian from the company. Obviously, it's a little bit more broad-based than, a veterinarian. Obviously, a disease is going to be the same no matter what state you're in. But the thing is, get me someone who's a specialist, someone who's going to understand it. Don't just get me a pitch man kind of thing.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good.
So can I ask a question then? Dustin,
Sure.
you just said someone who's been coached up. So as PR people, that's part of our job, is to coach people up and make sure that they're good spokespeople. You also said PR pitchman in the same breath there. Help us understand the difference between, or at what level you want people coached up to so that they're still authentic.
So basically, for what I would say, at least, is when I say coached up, I mean, give me someone, let's say if you're going to pitch a chemical product, just for an example, for a problem that's affecting the whole Corn Belt. If you're going to talk about Iowa, get me an Iowa sales rep that understands it, has been briefed on the topic. You guys will send out an email and give me like 5 or 6 bullet points on the great features of this. And then they'll have an interview and I'll get the person mentioning the same 6 great bullet points. And when I try to build that question off, I've run into more times than not sometimes, and maybe Jeff and Meghan have too, where they go back to those same 6 bullet points and can't extrapolate beyond that, or how it's going to work in a real world situation, or how the real world problem is being affected or can be affected by this product X, Y, or Z. Give me someone who knows about it, who can speak to it and can speak to how it applies to that area. Because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to do an interview that was over 3.5 minutes ago because they're not giving us any new information other than the bullet points that we got in the same email and could have written up in a reader story rather than putting on the radio.
That's good. That's good insight. Yep.
Cindy, I think the answer there is features. Someone that can go past what are the features and tell me the local benefits of what's happening. A tire has cars, a car has, because it has this particular tread pattern, can do this. Give me the benefit of the story. Someone who's got dirt in their fingernails or mud on their boots, or something that can practically happening from there. That would just be my observation.
I want to ask kind of a related question too, to around the who makes a good spokesperson is, at NAFB Trade Talk? What basic, because that's just, you're seeing everything there, and it's like a crazy day. What makes the best experience for you at Trade Talk? Can you give us some tips?
Focused content. I love, so I don't ever, I don't ever want somebody to be like, here, these are the questions I want you to ask. But like talking points are a great reference point, which is awesome. But like having content and having a focus to what you're going to deliver on. There are some booths where we stop because we, again, a luxury of having 12, 13 people conducting interviews at Trade Talk is we talk to everybody. And there are some that are 90 seconds long. And I'm like, well, this is all we're going to touch on today. And I want to go get the information that has substance and depth. And I want that substance and that depth and the things that can relate to our listeners on a broad basis is what makes Trade Talk enjoyable and successful for all of us.
Connect with me. Let's have a connection. Not just somebody who's really willing to engage and mix it up, and make their point, as opposed to mechanical. Give me a connection, smile, laugh, cut up, some emotion, so that when I introduce that guest, then they truly are a guest into my program. Can't hear you, Dustin.
Yeah, Dustin, I think you're on mute.
There, sorry, I forgot to turn my microphone back on. I mean, the most, I don't know if Jeff and Megan can speak to this or not, but one of the things, it doesn't happen everywhere, but it does happen occasionally, where the first thing that gets said to us as broadcasters is, how long do I have to talk? I don't care if you're going to talk to me for 8 to 10 minutes or you get it done in 3. Tell me something that's engaging. I don't want to drag it out to reach a certain time frame, nor do I want to have to decide what do I have to cut. Let's just talk about it. If you make it sound like you are just in a hurry to get out of there and how long do I have to talk to get the bare minimum across, that means you don't have much interest in even doing the spot with us to begin with. And that can be kind of almost, I shouldn't say a deal breaker, but can affect our perception of how we want to handle that interview as well.
Would you rather talk to somebody from the head of the company, or would you rather talk to somebody, a tech person from the field with mud on his or her boots?
Yes.
So
I'll say
I want
yes,
to
because
connect
who can give me, there's still a top answer, whether if I can get, say, I get the head of the company that's here to talk about this, great, give me something, that's great. But then let's have something to follow it up with
Yeah.
the whole idea of that local person. There's credence and there's stuff that can be gathered from both people, so yes, I will say yes, that's who I want. I want both of them.
Couple more questions I want to get squeezed in here before we only have a couple minutes left. From Michaela it's a couple of good questions. One is it helpful to have sample questions in the booth to start off the conversation? And then is there such a thing as too many subject matter experts in one booth? So 2 questions there.
In my opinion, it depends on the situation, right? Like there are some companies that have 2 to 3 Trade Talk booths and they have 9 experts, and we're going to talk to all of them and we want to get in there. Personally, I don't want pre-packaged questions because I don't think you get an authentic answer. And I'm going to say this, and I say this with all of the love and genuineness in my heart. Please don't ever ask me for questions ahead of an interview. Like if we're going to do an interview, don't say, can you tell me what we're going to talk about? Because I don't want the person we're interviewing to have pre-rehearsed answers and where it sounds like they're reading. I want, like Jeff talked about connection, a conversation. talking points are a really great way to get that conversation started. And I appreciate that. I don't want everybody to be rehearsed in reading from their script in their head and have it memorized. It makes for a more enjoyable radio experience and listening experience if it's a genuine conversation, because that's what we sound like. So that's my, I'm going to steal my boss's line. That's my 2 cents.
I would ask whoever we're talking to not to see me ugly, but see the people that I'm talking to. When you're talking to me, you're talking to Ohio. You're talking to a farmer in Wilmington. You're talking to a farmer at the coffee table in Kentucky. See them, talk to them, because I'm trying to ask and represent ideas that they would if they were standing there. So try to look past me and look to the person that I'm talking to, and connect, really connect. And if anybody who's been behind me in line at Trade Talk knows, I will talk until I get my answer. As long as it takes, I will stay with you until I get what I'm looking for. And then when I'm done, I'm done. So just connect with me and let's talk, move on.
Yeah, I would agree with both of them. And also I will say there's times I've seen you, Jeff, and go, I'll be back in a half an hour. He'll be ready. But Michaela, I know exactly where you're coming from, but I'll use you guys as an example, not to call you guys out, but I know with pork producers, when you have, let's say, the president of the organization talking about everything the organization's doing, and you hit on sustainability and you talk about disease prevention and all that stuff, and you have that, and then the next person you want me to interview wants to talk about sustainability and says the same thing over again, that can kind of be a situation where you've got too many experts in the field. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. You're getting a policy aspect considered to maybe the farmer aspect, but sometimes it feels like we're beating the dead horse on some of those topics. Some of them are important and get a different angle, yes, but if it's just the same thing being said over and over again, the same buzzwords, that's nothing new for us.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate that insight.
Well, we are at the bottom of the
Yeah,
hour. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. And Jeff and Dustin and Megan, I know you're all three of you are very busy, and having an hour of your time today, we're just very privileged, I would say, to have that. Thank you all. Thanks to the three of you for taking the time and for sharing your insights. We really, truly appreciate it. And I hope it's been valuable for you as well. I know it's been valuable for all of us. One of the things with broadcast, so it's more than just about, trade talk. NAFB is more than just trade talk. And that's, I guess, one of my passions. So things like this webinar, I just want to get off the ground and kind of get started. There's so much more value to NAFB. So anyway, thank you all three of you again for your time. Aaron and Tom, thank you also for helping to organize this. We will have a recording of this session that we'll send out as well to everybody if you'd like to kind of go back and listen in on any parts. And I wish you all a great rest of the afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gardner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.